So let's break down this Noah's Ark a little bit. Use a little bit of symbolism. The Ark housed every animal in pairs and groups. So this represents beings and people of every kind, every race, color, every creed. Two of every kind. And eventually this included both clean and unclean animals too. So even on a societal level, the people are tend that are tended to be looked down upon, they also get invited into this ark, who is built by a man named Noah. Now, Noah is nowhere. It sounds exactly like it sounds in slang. Nowhere. The Noah, the nowhere, has an ark to house you, to enter the state of a man who knows, to be a woman who knows, a child who knows, to be someone who knows, is an ark that will house all of the animalistic qualities within you, and you will be safe from whatever flood seeks to drown out society. The floods come in different forms. Don't always expect a physical flood. You can sometimes expect a flood of economics. It can flood. There can be a flood of social tensions. There can be a flood of corruption. There can be floods of many types that seek to threaten our existence in some way or another. But what the knower is the set of information that houses the animalistic qualities in man that makes it where you're going to be all right, where you start to use your animalistic urges to be resourceful, to be proactive, to be productive. All of these things inside the ark of knowing, inside the ark of a man who knows, so that when it floods for 40 days and 40 nights, the zeros not being a number, but the zeros being a portal, those two fours being an eight, the ultimate infinity, you will always be within knowing and without knowing for all infinity. That duality between being inside the ark of knowing and outside the ark of knowing, that will be eternal, because that is a duality. That is a portrait of a duality that is established. Now, on certain levels, everyone will know something. So the widespread dominant ignorance won't always be prevalent. Wisdom will be back in style. You have it now with forums and philosophies and debates and streaming and panels. And you have that with vlogs. You have that with different type of niches that all cater to that field of communication. So in this arc of knowing, you rescue yourself from a flood that can otherwise sweep you away. You can get caught in certain social media trends that can actually sweep you away. You could be swept away in something that may go counter to the direction that you're supposed to go in. You may be looking at this as just entertainment, but you may be putting more time into it and thereby putting yourself in another place of knowing, but not necessarily in the spot of knowing that's going to prevent you from being washed away by whatever flood comes, because you would thereby be in it. The water's coming from above and below too, in the story about the flood. So you have the Hegelian dialectic right there. The spirits representing people, representing energies, entities, pushing from above and pushing from below, because the fountains of the deep were broken up too, causing the rivers to actually rise at the same time that the water was pouring down. So you have this pressure to fit, in, pressure from above, keeping you from reaching a certain height, and pressure from below, keeping you out of a certain level of murk. So what do you do when you're stuck in the middle? You have to get on a boat or drown. This is one way to do it. One way to do it is to be the animal that is housed on the boat. But after a while, you have access to get off the boat and to take your knowing elsewhere. But you can't do it unless you're a bird. And the birds that did this were the raven and the dove. You can be either the black or the white, the raven or the dove. Both of them got off the boat before any other animal and any other human. The raven was the first bird to stay away from the boat. That was the first bird that when Noah let that bird out, that bird didn't come back, because the raven already found places to perch. Even before the flood waters abated, the raven flew out and didn't come back. So on the left-hand path, You find a certain sense of divinity even quicker. You're not gonna come back to the boat as as at all, but you're going to be the one who leaves that nest, that religious, proverbial, theological nest, that philosophical nest. You're going to be the first one to reach out on your own because you're the raven, and the raven is black, and the black represents the primordial mystery. So you're going to take, you can only be on a boat of knowing for so long because that knowing is only one arc of knowing, and you're going to go out and eventually explore your horizons. And this is the destiny of every human soul, that you're going to be pushed out from under the ark of the knower. And you're going to have to know thyself. But you can't know thyself if you're on the boat of another knower. You're only going to know that knower and the rules and regulations and animals that are housed on that particular boat. But if you want to get off of that boat before the flood waters subside, you're going to have to be one of these two birds. The raven, I would preferably, but this is really based on temperament, because both paths actually do lead to union with God. It's just that the raven and the black path, the left-hand path, leads to a step toward godhood, whereas the unification just ends in dissolution when you're on the right-hand path. You're dissolving into the light of God. That bird flies away differently. With the dove, the floodwaters were abated almost entirely before the dove left the last time. But as the waters were subsiding and the land was beginning to dry up somewhat, it was still marshy, so no one was safe to leave the boat yet because it was still swamp. But Noah knew that the time was coming to get off of the boat himself, along with the animals. So eventually they had to get off the boat too. But the dove was the last one with the message to let them know. The dove was really the last warning. The dove came back with an olive beak in his mouth. And you know what the olive is? That's the symbol of the anointing. So the right-hand path has to bring a messenger back to the people to let them know when it's time to get off the boat. The raven does not need that message. The raven flies around for any place to perch. As soon as it finds its own, it goes right away. The dove just needs that intermediary. It needs that mediator. It needs that middleman. It needs that olive beak. It needs that olive branch, rather, that olive leaf that the dove came back with in his beak, so it can know. So that particular group of people or believers can know when it is time to know themselves, because they won't start off knowing themselves. They'll start off knowing whatever the knower is about. They'll end up knowing about the knower under whose ark they are in, and in the custody, in the protection of, under the guidance of, under the auspices of. They are on the premises of someone else's ark. So that bird, that dove, brings the olive beak back to let them know that the time is coming. And then finally, when that dove doesn't come back, then the people on the boat of Noah, and also the souls who were saved in that flood equal 8. So you have infinity again. When you lay the 8 sideways, you have that new beginning. You have that ambition. Again, you have 2 8s, 40 days and 40 nights. That equals 8 in numerology. The zeros you do not add. And also, the 8 is what it is. You put those 2 8s together, of course, you'll get the 16 if you're just doing the angelic numbers and letting the numbers speak to you. 1 and 6 is 7. So then you have the full completion on both sides of infinity, both light and dark, both ethereal and earthly, to let you know the difference and the timing of when to be with the Noah on his and in his ark, and when to go off on your own and know thyself.